In terms of tracking, we have over 600,000 postal employees out there right now, so we have their eyes and ears looking for these packages.
Investigators have honed in on New York and Florida. Preliminary information suggesting at least some of those packages were sent from Florida. But all 10 bombs are being dissected in Quantico, where investigators are scanning for everything from DNA and fingerprints to similarities in how they were built. Questions remain over how many of the devices were operational and the nature of that powder packed in with the glass projectiles. Although the powder tested from the CNN mailer proved not to be dangerous, the bomb was live. Investigators believe all 10 bombs came from the same sender, and in New York, as across the country, a search for a terrorist charges on.
Clearly, what we've seen in the last few days is an attack on media outlets, an attack on prominent public figures. We're going to make sure there's expanded presence as long as we need it to show very vividly that New York City takes these issues seriously.
Although none of the bombs today reached their intended recipients, many of them were handled by civilians, and that has law enforcement encouraging the public to be vigilant. That bomb found in De Niro's office today, first noticed by a retired police officer turned security guard who noticed that package looked an awful lot like the ones he had seen on TV. Shannon.
Jackie Heinrich on the scene in New York. Thank you very much. In the wake of those suspected explosive devices mailed to numerous high-profile figures on the left, President Trump taking aim at a familiar target. Fake news. And not surprisingly, there's been plenty of pushback. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is here with the latest reaction. Hi, Ed.
Shannon, good to see you. Breaking tonight, tension only building between the president and the media, particularly CNN tonight, as Donald Trump Jr. is calling the network out for nonstop attacks on the presidential family. The president's son first retweeting this chyron that appeared on CNN's screen today, just about 24 hours after the attempted bombing at their headquarters. CNN saying on screen, quote, Trump has no plan to claim any responsibility for inciting serial bomber. That despite the fact that investigators still do not know very much of anything about motive or who's responsible for these attempted attacks. And since CNN correspondent Jim Acosta griped that the president did not mention CNN at his rally last night, and Acosta called him out for not taking responsibility for his rhetoric, yet criticizing the media's tone at the event, Donald Trump Jr. then tweeted at Acosta tonight, Jim, did you or your colleagues take any responsibility for your rhetoric in constantly calling my family racist and Nazis for 2 years when my wife actually opened an exploding envelope of white powder intended for me? What about when it happened to my brother? Well, Acosta replied, quote, Don, please understand everybody at CNN was terrified for members of your family when they were attacked. Please also understand that because of your father's rhetoric, calling us the enemy of the people, we're all very worried that somebody is going to get hurt. Well, we mentioned last night that John Brennan, former CIA director and an MSNBC contributor, continued his criticism. He said to the president, stop blaming others. Look in the mirror. Your inflammatory rhetoric, insults, lies, and encouragement of physical violence are disgraceful. Clean up your act. Try to act presidential. The American people deserve much better. By the way, your critics will not be intimidated into silence. Well, Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, lashed out at everyone today. Watch.
Day in, day out, there is a negative tone. 90% of the media attention around this president is negative. The very first thing that the president did was come out and condemn the violence. The very first thing your network did was come out and accuse the president of being responsible for it. That is not okay.
She was talking to someone at CNN. Well, CNN's Jake Tapper insisted he did not hear any one of his colleagues say publicly or privately that anyone other than the bomber or bombers that they're responsible. Although, remember, it was only yesterday that CNN President Jeff Zucker charged, quote, there is a total and complete lack of understanding at the White House about the seriousness of their continued attacks on the media. And Trump campaign aides today noted that CNN's parent company, Time Warner, sponsored a play in Central Park some months ago depicting the stabbing death of a presidential lookalike. CNN's Fareed Zakaria calling it brilliant at the time. Shannon?
I remember it well. Ed Henry, thank you.
Good to see you.
Our other top story tonight, the migrant caravan heading north through Mexico as 800 active duty U.S. troops are also heading to the southern border at the direction of President Trump. Trace Gallagher is here with the very latest. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. At the height of the Central American caravan, the numbers were estimated at about 7,000. Now we know that roughly 1,700 migrants have decided to apply for asylum in Mexico, and more than 1,000 others have dropped out because of exhaustion, sickness, fear, and a longing to go home. But reporters on the ground say the 4,000 or so that are continuing to move north have picked up speed by getting rides on buses, trains, and cars. But as the midterms approach, President Trump is vowing to hold his ground and planning to send 800 active duty troops to the southern border. We're told Defense Secretary James Mattis could sign the order for troops at any time. The 800 military members would be on top of the 2,000 National Guard members already at the border. And tonight, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen explained to Martha McCallum how the troops would be used. Watch.
What we've asked them to do is help to bolster our capabilities. So we've asked for some air support, for some logistics, some planning, vehicle barriers, engineering, ways in which we can make sure that I can protect my officers and agents as well as the ports of entry themselves.
It's unclear if the U.S. troops would be armed or if they would engage with the migrants in any capacity. Today, the president sent a message directly to the people coming north, quoting here, "To those in the caravan, turn around. We are not letting people into the United States illegally. Go back to your country, and if you want, apply for citizenship like millions of others are doing." Of course, migrants who reach the border can claim asylum and would be allowed to stay while their cases are being processed. But many in the caravan have told Fox News they don't plan to seek asylum, but they do plan to come into the United States. And for context, last year the U.S. had 331,000 asylum claims, the most of any country in the world, and the number of asylum claims in 2017 was 4 times higher than it was back in 2013. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. We'll debate that a little bit later. Returning to our discussion of the political tensions here at home, 2 Republicans also getting threats this week. Congressman Carlos Curbelo got a death threat via social media. His office says today they notified U.S. Capitol Police, who quickly identified the individual. And a Republican running for Congress in New Jersey shared this photo on Twitter of a letter he received which allegedly made threats against his children. The letter was also apparently delivered with a torn-up campaign sign. All right, well, one of the Democrats targeted in the suspected explosive device mailings, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, is blasting President Trump, saying he should take responsibility for political violence.
He is expert at lying and deceiving and, of course, encouraging people in his own way to be violent or to be racist or to be separatist.
So let's talk about it with tonight's Power Panel. Vice Chair of the DNC, Michael Blake, and President of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp. Welcome to you both.
Great to be here.
Great to be with you.
All right, Matt, what do you make of what Congresswoman Waters had to say there?
Yeah, this is just absolutely irresponsible. We've taken political differences, and there's plenty of those out there, actually too many. And the Trump haters are turning these acts, these bombs, this terrible, scary incident, and they're trying to say his rhetoric somehow is responsible for the bombs, while at the same time there's an investigation about who actually sent these packages. It's like Maxine Waters already has determined it came from Mar-a-Lago. And I think that the politics of this are disgusting, they're hateful, and I think they're going to boomerang on the Democrats. Like, we should be taking a pause from politics. People's lives could be at stake, people could be harmed. Let's see what the FBI and investigators find out before we jump to these wild, irresponsible conclusions.
Well, and Michael, for those who have said that this came from someone on the right who was trying to hurt enemies or, targets of the president, John Podhoretz has a piece tonight on NewYorkPost.com. He says, if indeed the bomber was doing this to take revenge against Trump's enemies, he was doing Trump no favors. For the simple fact of the matter is that the event casts a light not on those critics, but now on Trump and Trump's rhetoric itself at exactly the moment when it is least helpful to him politically. I mean, Michael, now, days away from the midterm, we're having this conversation about the president and his role.
Well, first and foremost, we obviously say thank you to the first responders and those in uniform that are standing up for us in the face of these kind of crises. Now, it would be irresponsible for Matt to try to be conveying that he's just disregarding the truth when this is someone who actually had a tweet last month that was clear about race baiting. This is a part of a rhetoric that has existed on the other side that has been pure about fear. Now, look, let's be very clear about this. Yes, an investigation is happening right now, but it would also be irresponsible for us to make it seem like Donald Trump has absolutely no responsibility in this at all. This is someone who has repeatedly been talking about slamming of reporters.
But we're talking about someone who allegedly at this point has put together devices full of glass shards and powder to blow up in people's faces if they were indeed meant to detonate. You can't possibly be directly linking the president to that action.
I didn't, Shannon, and let's not go down that road of trying to put words in Democrats' mouth. I know that's what happens.
No, not doing it, but you said, you said the president has to take some role for this.
Absolutely.
So you're blaming the president. Let's just be clear. You're blaming the president's rhetoric for these bombs.
All right, let's
let Michael finish what he's saying. But I'm just saying, if you are pointing a finger at the president saying he bears some responsibility in that, I want to be clear about exactly what you're saying.
Yes. Am I being abundantly clear that when you have someone that is calling the press enemies of the state, yes, there is responsibility in the raised rhetoric that is happening here that is very different from trying to attribute it to actual bombing in that manner. However, let's be clear. Donald Trump has repeatedly been communicating this rhetoric, and for us to say that there is no bearing at all would be irresponsible.
So Matt, what connection is there?
None. And the fact is,
but the president has said things about people in his rallies and saying, joking about roughing people up and, praising Congressman Gianforte, who got in trouble for body slamming a reporter. I mean, what part of that factors in?
Well, there's two things here. The first thing is the biggest characteristic at the rally, which the press in the last 24 hours has been condemning, is when Trump supporters say lock her up, meaning lock Hillary up, basically, which means hold Hillary Clinton accountable for her crimes. They're not saying blow her up. They're not saying she should be killed. They're simply saying there should be a just legal response to the steps she took. They also have criticized him and the rally goers for saying CNN sucks. Well, guess what? CNN needs to be more balanced. And it's a huge leap and an irresponsible leap to say that those statements imply that they want these people to be killed or to get bombed. And that is the problem here. You have Eric Holder, the former chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America, as the AG, saying it's okay to kick people like me. You have Hillary Clinton saying you don't have to be civil to people like me. You have Republicans being kicked out of restaurants and run out of civil society. You have candidates, Republican candidates, who have been stabbed, who have received death threats. The idea that this is about Donald Trump alone and about CNN alone is incorrect.
Right, I want to play a little something.
I want to play something that a death threat myself. It is irreprehensible that I'm listening to Matt, who did a tweet last month, literally saying to conservative voters, "Look at this photo," when talking about Democratic people of color, and making it seem like this is.
So I'm a racist. This is where you guys always go.
Wait,
don't go there.
Guys, let's stop here because I want to keep this factual. Matt, what was the tweet, or Michael, if you want to tell us? It was a picture.
Absolutely, Shannon. Last month, there was a tweet sent out by Matt with a photo of 3 Democratic people of color, Democratic senators, people of color, and said conservative voters in these particular states, look at this photo. And so that's the epitome of race baiting.
I'd like to respond.
Yes, Matt, tell us.
I'd like to respond because every deplorable and Trump supporter who is now listening to this interview can see that what Democrats do is they call us fascist and racist. And let's look at the facts. The facts are. You just called me a racist, and the facts are that when those senators, including Dianne Feinstein, which was also mentioned in the tweet, I also talked about Anglo Democrat senators who went after Brett Kavanaugh. I said their actions in attacking the reputation of Brett Kavanaugh were reprehensible, and you make it about race. I don't care what the color of the skin was of the people who went after. I don't care.
All right.
Stop this. This is an irresponsible use of time on this show. It's a change of subject, and I quite frankly, I'm not going to put up with it.
Okay, we're not going to solve anything here. But Michael and Matt, we appreciate both of you coming and weighing in, and we'd love to see you back soon. Thank you.
Look forward to it on the election.
All right, President Trump proposes a new plan to lower drug prices as the midterm message. War over health care heats up.
We are here to announce another bold and historic action to bring down the price of prescription drugs.
And Chris Steyerwalt is here to break down some key midterm races as
his political enemies, some of whom were targeted by today's bombs.
The president and several Republican candidates say they are eager to show how ready they are to tackle healthcare issues
in our country right now, and he's not doing anything to really tone that down. from the stump earlier
The
this
impulse
week
to blame the president takes us back to the issues
Together
of
we are
basic
going to
fairness and
end
common
the
sense, two
scourge
qualities
of
that seem to
drug
be in
addiction
short
in
supply these
America.
to a
days.
major policy
It's
speech with the
irresponsible
Health and
and
Human
it's
Services
outrageous for
Secretary
these folks to even imply that somehow
here to
these
announce another
dastardly
bold and
acts were
historic
provoked
action
by our commander-in-chief.
to bring down the price
and the
of
media
prescription
wonder why the
drugs.
American
to
people
Twitter
have
yesterday saying
increasingly little
Republicans will
respect for
totally
them.
protect people with
And plus,
pre-existing
where was
conditions.
their outrage and fury
Democrats
when
will
prominent
not
Democrats
vote
were either just
Republican.
personally
With
and
Obamacare
viciously
at a
insulting
54%
conservatives
approval
or actually
rating, the
using
president's
aggressive
implicit
action
message to
toward them?
Republicans, even in dark red states like Missouri, is they need to move left, and they are.
Forcing insurance companies to cover all pre-existing.
And despite a past life running hospitals, Florida Governor and Senate candidate
Press
Rick
always
Scott
asks me, don't I wish I
promises
were
to
debating
protect
him?
the little guy.
No, I wish we were in high school. I could take him behind the gym.
Health insurance.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to
if you have a pre-existing
destroy
condition. Bill
what
Nelson
you
has
stand
never
for,
done
what you
anything
care
to
about.
improve health care other than make
No
the costs go up.
toxicity there at all.
Deductibles go up.
No
Premiums go
urging
up,
of
and
aggressive
co-payments go up.
rhetoric or aggressive
of Democrats
attitudes.
and 31%
And
of
where was all the
independents
media
rank
and Democrat
healthcare as the
outrage when
top issue
Hollywood
this
made
election
threats
cycle,
and showcased bloody
17%
depictions of the
Republicans,
president?
forcing Republicans
It's
like
William
Florida Governor
Shakespeare's
candidate
play,
Rick
Julius
DeSantis
Caesar,
to try
like
and
you've
paint
never
Dems
seen
as moving
before. A man
too
dressed
far
to
left
look like
to those
President Donald
independents.
Trump
So you
gets
don't support
stabbed to
Bernie
death
Sanders'
on
Medicare
stage.
at all?
Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Medicaid for over 800,000 Floridians.
I won't give away what we're doing, but Tyler and I are not afraid to do images that make noise.
Republicans have a lot of ground to make up in the less than
I
2
have
weeks
thought
before Election
an
Day. A
awful
Washington
lot
Post poll
about
shows
blowing
voters
up the
trust
White House.
Democrats
When was the last
over
time
Republicans on
an
healthcare
actor assassinated a
by a
president?
I'm going to say one thing. Trump.
All right. Well, we're going to talk
sorry.
about that and
I
much
guess that
more. Thank you,
constitutes
Leland
high
Bittert.
art in America these
And we're also
days.
going to focus on three
Well, not only
key,
was there no
surprisingly tight
criticism from the
midterm
left, they
races
were
with Fox News
applauding this
Politics
stuff.
editor,
And they
editor
just
of the
love
Halftime
these
Report, Chris
ugly
Stilwell, also
personal
the author of the new
confrontations.
bestseller, Every
Ones
Man
like
and
this.
King. Are you going to start showing
And
up
they're
in a
so
crown?
nasty.
I do.
All the
And like with
different
the
stuff.
But then they
whether
make-
it's the
they make me
stores
take
to
it
the
off right before I
restaurants
come
to
out.
elevators.
Something you can back up.
That is
I don't
true.
recall
That is
folks
true.
like
You're
Joe
the royalty.
Scarborough asking
Right.
if Hillary
Okay,
or
let's talk about North
Maxine's
Carolina.
rhetoric
In
led
District
to all
9,
this
very interesting race.
harassment
A
and
lot of heavy hitters
viciousness.
coming in for this one congressional
I
race
think the
on both sides
Democrats
of
have
the
just
aisle.
gotten so wrapped around the axle
no
about Trump and all this stuff he's
question
achieved and
you
his
know
numbers are going
how
up that they've
close
adopted
the
a by
Republicans
any means
see
necessary
control of the House
strategy
as being.
to get him
if
out
they're
of power.
willing to invest this
And by
much
not
effort,
strongly
North Carolina
and
doesn't have a Senate
repeatedly
race.
condemning
North Carolina
the group's
doesn't have a
destructive
gubernatorial
activities
race. It's
and the
one
methods.
of 435
I think in a way
House
you
races,
could argue that
and
they've
you've got
become
the
the
president,
party
vice
by
president,
default of
everybody
Antifa.
going down to try to save this seat.
And let's stop
One of the
comparing,
other
by the
things
way, the
about this
Tea
that is
Party to
interesting,
Antifa, as some on the
just as
left have
Barack Obama
strained to
found,
do. I
you
heard
can't
that
go
today.
everywhere.
Right.
Last time I
there's a
checked, the
limited
Tea
number of
Party is
places,
like
so this is
dressed
not
up
a
like
good
Betsy
time, for example,
Ross and so
for
forth.
Donald Trump to be in Ohio.
Yeah, they were gathering
Wouldn't
and
be a good
debating
time
about
for
how
him
to
be in
stop
Pennsylvania.
Obamacare and stop future bailouts, arguing about TARP
His
and
numbers
stuff
are low
like
in
that.
those states
The
that
Tea
he
Party was
won,
interested in
but where he's
driving
not so
people to
popular
the
anymore.
polls in
North
2010,
Carolina is the
not
kind of
driving
place
people
where he
from the
can
public
vote. Yes, it
square.
will cause a backlash among Democrats.
And now in
It
the
will
wake
increase
of these
Democratic
bomb
intensity.
mailings,
But there are enough
it is
Republican voters out there in
amusing,
North
if not
Carolina that they
disturbing,
can make
to
a
watch the
district in a
Pied
race like
Pipers
this.
of chaos,
James Taylor,
the
showing
fomenters
up
of
there as
harassment,
well.
try
Not
to
for the
flip the script.
Republicans.
No.
No.
All of you guys, I'm so glad that you're here and alive today because we could have been mourning you guys.
I do know in my heart that President Trump bears a lot of responsibility for rhetoric that made it almost inevitable that top Democrats and the media would be targeted.
So in the average, Senator Nelson has been consistently ahead 5-6 points. It's been pretty consistent. So this is the first poll that we have seen in quite a while that has the race close. Now it was close once upon a time, and Scott even had an advantage in the early going.
Basically go find them wherever they are, at a gas station, a restaurant, wherever they are in public.
Or is this the beginning of a trend?
My friends,
and for
we all
Scott,
remember what
he needs it
happened
to be the
more
start
than
of
a
a
year
trend
ago,
now,
June of
because as you're talking
2017,
about with early
when a
voting already going
Trump-hating
on,
Bernie
the
Sanders
time is
supporter,
running out
and yes,
quickly.
it was all
and that's one of those
verified,
states
James
where there are big
Hodgkinson,
things, multiple big
opened
things on the
fire
ballot because you've got
at a
the governor's
Republican
race too
baseball
with
practice.
Thomas and
There could have been
Gillum
12
and
people
Congressman
killed,
Ron DeSantis.
not one nearly killed, of course, as Congressman Steve Scalise was.
And shows up.
And when somebody came, began looking for a political explanation for the shooting?
Rather narrowly.
Do you remember what Nancy Pelosi at the time said?
A four-term incumbent there, Senator Debbie Stabenow, but John James, this business owner, former military guy, he was down 23 points in September. This new poll says 7. Is there any shot for the GOP there?
Well, there's always a shot.
Never seen such a thing before. I think
Baylor
that the comments made by my Republican colleagues
You're saying
down 50, they might have won. It's all, anything anything's always
dignity of the
possible.
job that
Here's
they
what
hold.
that poll shows.
How dare
a
they
poll
say
for
such a
the
thing?
Detroit News basically
How dare
says
anyone
that the races have
ascribe
both
any
tightened,
type
that
of connection
Bill Schuette, who's
to
the Republican nominee
nasty,
for governor, that
horrible,
both of the races
criminal
have closed. Now,
act
I would tell everybody
with
this.
tonality
as you get closer
or
to the end,
atmospherics.
undecided voters lie.
In the aftermath of the school shooting,
when they say
there
they're undecided, some
was
people flatter
no
themselves. Well, I
examination
might
of
still
how
change my
Democratic
mind. What
rhetoric
happens
might
at
have
the
contributed
end
to the
is
violence.
as name
And there
identification for the
certainly
candidates goes
were no
up, and
apologies
people
from the
return
left.
to their
I don't think
partisan roots,
all that
you
many
will
people
always see
demanded
this
apologies.
tightening at the very end. Now,
But
whether or
now,
not James has
in a
enough
joint
mojo,
statement
he's a
with Chuck
very
Schumer,
good
Pelosi
candidate.
is actually trying to blame the president for these suspicious packages. She said in a statement, time and time again, the president has condoned physical violence and divided Americans with his words and actions. Okay, well, where was she last year when Maxine Waters, she's now the queen of the lefty speaker circuit, was making threats like this?
Pipe bombs to prominent
And with
Democrats,
this kind of inspiration,
was working at CNN.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
There is a region of interest.
Law enforcement ultimately has proven they will find the perpetrators. Explosive devices.
All right, here's the latest into the search for a suspect in the mailing of 10 suspected explosive devices to prominent Democrats and CNN. Investigators are focusing on Florida, New York, and Maryland as regions of interest, and officials are treating the packages as live devices, saying they are not hoaxes. Let's bring in former Special Agent, Vice President of Intelligence at Stratfor, Fred Burton, and Fox News contributor, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Andrew McCarthy. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Shannon.
All right, I want to read you something. I want to read you something from the Washington Post. It says there's a rich treasure trove of forensic information since they were found intact. This is quoting Matthew Doherty, formerly of the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center. He says it means that FBI investigators can look for patterns such as the device, the technical expertise, the method of mailing, a whole host of great, rich forensic evidence that can be gathered. Fred, I'm guessing they have gathered a whole lot of information we, the public, don't yet know about.
Absolutely, Shannon. There's no doubt in my mind. I would not be surprised in the least that with the focus on the mail facility in Florida, that they've actually have some CCTV footage of some pretty good suspects going in and out of there. And if you think about this in context with our recent Austin bomber that we had here, and think about the resources that were devoted to hunt him down, you can look at this as an example of what's taking place behind the scenes.
Clearly. Okay, so now the LA Times touches on something that, Andy, you've written about too, which is what was the intent here? The headline is, Design suggests suspicious packages intended to spread fear rather than destruction. Within the text of the article says, because none of the 10 suspicious devices sent to prominent figures in recent days have ignited, investigators now suspect that either a would-be bomb maker is inept or the packages were intended to spread fear rather than inflict injury or death, according to two people with knowledge of the investigation. I would assume, Andy, for experienced investigators, FBI, bomb techs, and others, they're going to know the difference rather quickly.
Yeah, they are, Shannon, although, you know, it's interesting, and I think Fred can attest to this as well. At the beginning of the investigation, when it's just one or two packages, you have to take the position, because it would be irresponsible to take any other position, that these are live bombs. This is somebody who intends to commit mass murder. When you get to the point where you're, 24, 36 hours fast forward, and now you've got 10 devices and nothing has gone off. And in fact, what we're also hearing is that, most of the time when you're dealing with packages like this, the idea is that they're booby-trapped. The act of opening them is what detonates them. And that hasn't happened here with respect to at least some of them that have been opened. You have to then start shifting your theory to the idea that what we're dealing with is somebody who intended to frighten